All right, I think it's 9:30 and we will begin. So, good morning, everyone. This is Judy Sargent from CISA 7. Glad to see you all here today. And we want to welcome you to the first in a series of ASA's data leadership webinars. This is the first one. There will be 3 others, and today we will be focusing on data inquiry into safe and supported students. This session is being recorded. We'll be spending the morning together until 11 o'clock. You'll have opportunities to check with us to follow up with your work during office hours on November 20, but we'll share more about that later. We'd like to introduce you to our team here. So we are the WISExplore team. We are 5 people who develop training and resources for statewide use to build capacity with inquiry. And we are your go-to for anything WISE in terms of the WISE system in Wisconsin. Our current WISExplore team includes Lisa Arneson. Give us a wave, Lisa, from
Everybody.
From CISA 3. Terrific. We also have Marianne Hujak from CISA 6.
Good morning.
And from Wild Rose this morning. Myself from CISA 7, and we have Jim Lee from CISA 12, way up in Ashland.
Hello.
And we have Wendy Savasky here from DPI. Glad you could join us today, Wendy.
Good morning, everyone.
And we also have our awesome Jenna, who is moderating and, or I would say, hosting this webinar from ASA. Hi, Jenna. Good to see you. And she's been checking in with you and emailing you and keeping you updated with everything regarding this webinar and many other professional development opportunities through ASA. So Jenna's going to help you in terms of turning cameras off, gallery view to see the Brady Bunch view, and you know, when you want to talk, of course, everybody knows to unmute your mic as needed. And so we'd like you for a moment here to open your mic and let us know what your role is. We want to welcome everyone. I see an Alex there. Alex, are you there?
I am. Good morning. Alex Mushik. I'm an associate principal at Kate Goodrich Elementary School in Merrill.
Okay, welcome, Alex. And I see a Nick. Nick, are you there?
Yes, good morning. Nick Bean. I'm the Director of Teaching and Learning at St. Croix Central School District up in Hammond Roberts, Wisconsin.
Welcome, Nick. And someone whose name I'm not going to dare pronounce, Damraj, are you there?
Yeah, hi, Jeff Domero, principal at Grant Elementary with the School District of Marshfield.
Jeff. Hi, Jeff. Thank you. Sorry about the name.
No worries, Judy.
Amy from Waukesha.
Yeah, I'm Amy Riebel. I oversee assessment, data, and summer school for the School District of Waukesha.
Wonderful. Annie?
Hi, I'm Annie Kungshag. I am the new curriculum coordinator in the Elk Mound Area School District, which is near Eau Claire.
A new position. Congratulations. And we have Carmen.
Hi, Carmen Lee from Arcadia, Director of Curriculum Instruction and Assessment.
Wonderful. Thank you. And good to see you, Carmen. And Chris. We have several Chris's. So Chris Larishki.
I am Chris Larishki. I'm one of the associate principals at Hamilton High School in Sussex.
Wonderful. And another Chris Sapersky.
Chris Sapersky, principal at Lakeview Elementary in the School District of South Milwaukee.
Welcome, Chris. And Craig.
Hi, Craig Hinden, Dean of Students, School Counselor, Augusta School District.
Wonderful. Cynthia.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Porter. I'm the principal at Pittsville High School.
Okay, welcome, Cynthia. Dave.
I'm Dave Schaller. I'm the principal at the alternative school here in Chippewa Falls.
Okay, welcome, Dave. And we have Glenda. Glenda, are you there? And I know Glenda's here from Merrill, and we'll talk to Jenna.
Hi, I'm Jenna here. I'm an associate principal in the School District of Waukesha.
Okay. And is there a Jenny that I know from CISA 7 there?
Yeah,
Gracie?
Jenny Gracielny, Director of Learning Services in the Pulaski Community School District. Hi, Judy.
Hey, Pulaski, good to see you. All right, and let's see who's next here. We have, somebody named Candreessen. Who is that?
Actually, that's me. I'm Kathy Andreessen. I'm the Principal and Educator Effectiveness Implementation Coordinator in the Baraboo School District, and I'm the principal at North Freedom Elementary.
Wow, now there's a title. Welcome. Kevin.
Hi, Kevin Moore, Principal at Adams Friendship High School.
Welcome, Kevin. And KL Sufka, who is that? Not sure about the name there. Jen, I don't know if you can help me with that one.
Yeah, that must be our principal, Curtis Sufka, who's at Glenbrook Elementary School in Pulaski.
Thank you, Jenny. Kristen Gall from CISA 3.
Hi, I'm Kristen Gall. I am one of the data specialists in CISA 3 and math and science consultant.
Welcome, Kristen. Kyle.
Kyle Moore, Principal at Wilson Elementary School in the Sheboygan Area School District.
Hey, good to see you. Good that you're here. Luke.
Hi, this is Luke Pinion, the Director of Student Services in the School District of Waukesha.
Okay, great. And Laura?
Hi, Laura Gennaro, Assistant Principal at West Bend West High School.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you.
Lindsay.
Hi, Lindsay Mattice, Assistant Director of Learning Services in Pulaski.
Hey, Pulaski's in the house for sure. Great. And Liz. Liz, are you there? Liz Kazar. We'll move to Mark.
Mark Vandenhoutsen, Principal at Little Chute Elementary.
Hey, welcome from Little Chute. Mark Otto.
Hi, Mark Otto, one of the Associate Principals at Hamilton High School in Sussex.
Welcome. Mary Larson.
Hi, I'm Mary Larson. I'm the Elementary Principal, Curriculum Coordinator, and Library Media Director at the Judah School District.
Wonderful. Welcome. Nick from Clear Lake. Are you there? We'll move on to Peg from Clintonville.
Hi, Peg Mishler from Clintonville. I'm the Director of Curriculum and Associate Principal at the elementary school.
Welcome, Peg. Rachel Herman.
Hi, Rachel Herman, Director of Secondary Teaching and Learning in the School District of Waukesha.
Welcome. And Rachel Tassler.
Hi, I'm Rachel Tassler, Elementary Principal at West Elementary in Anago.
Way to go. Good to see someone from Anago. Reed. Reed.
Hi, I'm Reed Pekka, Middle High School Principal in Augusta.
Hey, good to see you, Reed. Scott.
Hi, I'm Scott Carr, Director of College and Career Readiness and Analytics at Hartford Union School District.
Wonderful. Welcome. Tara.
Tara Serwinski, Principal in Milton, Wisconsin.
Okay, welcome. Tequila.
Tequila Kurtz, Principal at Upgrade Media Arts in Pewaukee.
Welcome. Trisha.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Trisha Dieter, Elementary Principal in Merrill.
All right. Is there anyone who did not have an opportunity to say hello this morning? Well, welcome to all of you. Yes? Anyone there?
Hi, Judy. This is Teresa Brzezinski, Director of Curriculum Instruction Assessment at Tomahawk.
Okay, welcome. Welcome. Thanks for jumping in there. All right. So about this, yes, go ahead.
Sorry, Judy. Tony Bosco, Director of Instructional Leadership and Equity for the School District of Beloit.
Hey, Tony. Good to see you all. So about this webinar, this is a partnership between ASA and WISExplore. The topics that we're going to be exploring today are varied. You might even consider them non-traditional when it comes to data inquiry. Throughout this series, and you can see there's a whole series here of 4 webinars for data leadership, we'll be exploring data sources that one might use to conduct inquiry. And today it's safe supported students. The next one in December 3rd will be effective instruction inquiry. Then in January, move to family and community engagement. And then lastly, through school and instructional leadership inquiry. These topics align closely with the DPI's mission priorities, and they are particularly important now during these unprecedented times of COVID. Our whole data inquiry is shifting based on sort of these needs. So the outcomes for today are on the screen here. First of all, we're going to look at state and local evidence sources related to safe and supported students. What sources could we possibly use? Second, to understand the processes for conducting and leading inquiry, and hearing your positions this morning as you introduced yourselves. We have so many leaders from different roles, curriculum directors to principals, etc. here. We want to give you tools to lead this and build that capacity back in your schools and districts. And we're going to be focusing on inquiry both in student data and in practices data. Also, we want you to be able to plan your own investigation to go back and inform your own theories of action and your plans for improvement. We want to really connect to your continuous improvement. You'll also see that we're going to be offering 3 different extension activities after we end at 11 o'clock this morning, and we'll go through those later as to how to access those. And we did introduce yourselves, but we'd also like you, if you would please, to rename yourself on the Zoom by just clicking on your name and finding rename. And if you would put your name, it can be just your first name or both, and then your district name would be good, or your school name. That was just going to be helpful when we go into breakout rooms later, so we kind of know who each other is. So if you could just click rename and do that now, that'd be great. And then moving forward, we're going to move into building the why. Why are we focusing on this topic today? And I'll turn it over to Jim Lee.
Thanks, Judy. So we want to start this conversation off about the focus on safe and supported students. And I know from my very early work with children at risk and later designing and implementing alternative education schools, this was a very critical factor in the development of our educational environments to help kids, particularly who were disengaged from the learning process, re-engage. And today, in light of what's happening with the disruption of what we traditionally did with our educational environments, this becomes a particular focus. Next slide, Judy. So we know that the psychological and physiological factors and physical factors are very important to learning. My original training on Maslow's hierarchy of needs said that for us to get to the point where we could work with students in a way that they felt actualized in their learning required that we address some of the very fundamental issues of physiological needs, but also their sense of safety and their sense of connectedness to the educational environment. And so under normal circumstances, we would be focusing on prevention in the environment of things like substance abuse or risk behaviors, or trying to prevent bullying. And now we are also moving more deeply into more conversations related to equity and how we build relationships with students, particularly in a situation where they're not in our classrooms every single day, or maybe not at all anymore. We're doing this all in an online setting in many cases. So it's even more important that we take a look at the factors of how do we help students feel safe and supported in their learning, in this changed educational environment. And relationships matter. And how are our relationship building efforts with teachers, between teachers and parents and students, how has that shifted during distance learning as a result of the pandemic, or about the blended maybe models that you are using in your schools? And what can we do to address that? How do we find out if that's working or not? Now, there's a link in the chat, and maybe we should repost that link for anyone who joined late. So Lisa or Marianne, if you could link that in there. There's a link to this slide deck. And in this slide deck, there are a number of links in the slides themselves. But if you go into the notes, and particularly on this slide, we have a whole series of links that will help you as a leader put together some of your thoughts around a focus on safe and supported students and why this matters. And particularly if you're going to work with a team of educators in your school in looking at this issue, could help frame the conversation about where you might want to begin with inquiry into the safe and supported aspects of the student's life in your school. Next slide, Judy. So one of the things we know is that if students don't feel safe and supported, there is an increase in mental health problems with students. We know that chronic stress can increase, particularly in an online environment now, and that the pandemic has created for students and their families. And so the relationships that we've built with kids is also being strained. And so many of these things that when students don't feel that connection that they may have had before can affect the student's well-being. And there's a number of resources again on this slide that you could look at and further understand what the impact of students who don't feel safe and supported is on their learning and in their educational environment. Next slide. You know, one of the things we've done in adjusting to the COVID-19 pandemic has been making some shifts and changing how we deliver our education to the students. And we have a number of kids who have made decisions perhaps to go to a full online environment. We have some places in time when, particularly last spring, when you know, everything was put into an online environment, and it caught us as educators in many cases sort of scrambling to figure out what's the best practice in implementing distance learning, and we've kind of worked through some of those things, and now we need to talk about what's the impact of our strategies. So here are some recommended suggested online learning time for students in that remote learning environment. And if you take a look at that, it comes from, I believe it's the Illinois Board of Education. Take a look at that and compare that with what are you providing in your online environment in terms of your expectations of students' participation in your online learning situations. How many of you are using a guideline, something like this? How many of you haven't maybe considered what the impact of online time is as it relates to the students' senses of being stressed out? There's also some additional links here that are provided by the regional educational laboratories in addition to the DPI. In the notes, there's several links that will help, again, frame the conversation about why it's important to take a look at what are those practices in this distance learning environment that we find ourselves in.
So Jim, we have in the chat that Peg from Clintonville says they're using this chart for their elementary guidelines.
Ah, very good, very good. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Next slide. Maybe we can share later when we get into an activity how that's working.
Jim, we have a question in the chat from Rachel. Is this the recommendation for total time to include both synchronous and asynchronous?
Yes, it's a recommendation of minutes for both when students would be engaged both synchronously and asynchronously, as I understand these research.
Yeah, in the in the notes below the slide, it says, note that this amount of student engagement districts should aim for is inclusive of digital interaction and assigned work. So that's kind of interesting when you take that into account.
Let's go to the next slide. And then the final thing is, one of the things that's important is to understand the developmental considerations with regard to learning, especially we have students participating in these online environments. And so there's, again, several links here on the slide that will give you some background on what to expect developmentally from children in terms of their learning styles and their, the types of things that they're capable of doing. And I know that I've worked with a number of teachers last spring who really had to focus on making some shifts and adjustments into what they were expecting from kids in those environments. And it wasn't the same. And so this is also an important piece to consider when we focus and investigate safe and supported students. Next slide, Judy. So we're going to give you a moment here. This is partly a setup of a note-taking template that we're providing, which you can use throughout the rest of this session. It's linked in the slides if you're able to open them. Maybe we can pop that link into the chat so folks can get to it quickly that way if they don't have those slides open. What we'd like you to do is take a few minutes to jot down your reflections of just this conversation of why should we focus on safe and supported. And we've given you a few things to think about, but what are your local considerations? What are your reflections about why you want to explore this further? And
Jim and team, we need to check on access. Someone says access, but I think it forces you to make a copy. Thank you, Marianne.
It should force you to make a copy.
And I did put a link to the template in the chat as well if people don't have the slides open.
So when you do get this open, we'd like you to think a little bit more on this idea of building a why. Why do you want to explore this further? How would you explain the why that you to maybe a team in your school or a group in your school about why this is important, why it should be investigated more deeply, why you should gather some data around that. And then also think a little bit about who would you collaborate with this, and then what type of action you might take. So what we're asking you to do, I guess, is open that up. We're going to give you about 5 minutes to just put some reflections in on this chart. And we'll be using it in the future. So this is a good time to solve all the access problems.
I think the link did get fixed now. So
it looks like it. Yep.
Be able to get in.
All right. We'll start a timer here. We'll give you about 5 minutes to do this part of the activity.
And thanks all for using the chat.
Yes, absolutely.
All right, 5 minutes on the dot. Are we ready to continue? All right, my name is Lisa Arneson. I'm going to talk you through a little bit of student data inquiry today. There are, on the next slide, there are actually 3 major parts to the WISExplore data inquiry process. And here we can see them with rings. They're represented here by rings. All of them do align to the DPI's continuous improvement process, criteria and rubric, and that is linked on this slide as well. We're going to begin with the data inquiry process needs assessment piece. It's shown here as the red ring. This results in a priority outcome for students, and we get to focus on that. And then we bridge to the practices data inquiry needs assessment, shown as the green ring. So on the previous slide, you can see the transition over to the green ring. And this helps us identify priority outcomes for educators and a look at those practices, those adult practices. So these 2 data inquiry needs assessments inform the important improvement planning process which we can see here in the yellow ring. Unfortunately, in our time together today, we will not go through all of these steps. They take a considerable amount of time. However, you should be aware that the entire process is used to conduct a thorough data inquiry to ascertain the details and depth needed to inform an effective improvement plan that will address root causes of the outcomes that need improvement. It's also the process that's required for an improvement plan that's developed in response to a federal identification, whether that's ESCA or IDEA. And now we can move on. Student data inquiry is a process used to investigate learning needs at a district, school program, or classroom level. There are 4 steps to this process: question, investigate, clarify, and hypothesize. Ideally, a team follows these steps to identify those critical priorities and likely root causes. But due to our time constraints, we are going to focus on question and investigate. Part of the extension activities that Judy mentioned, we do have a video activity that you could use to engage in a root cause analysis. Also, our CISA data specialists, you can contact them at any time for assistance. They've been trained to guide you through the entire process, including a root cause analysis. And so our inquiry question, typically that's where we start. And the question that's going to guide us today is, to what degree are your students feeling safe and supported in their learning during the pandemic? And we're going to take a look at the kinds of data, right, that's going to help us answer those questions. Additional questions to consider regarding that data will guide us. So what information is now being collected from students about how they perceive their safety and their support? How is that collected? Where is the data kept for educator access? And how are you protecting student privacy? Additionally, which student data are being used to guide decisions about how to make adjustments in those supports that we do have for our students? So on the next slide, you'll see we've got an activity. So linked here is a Jamboard. We want to take a few minutes to get you brainstorming data sources that are available in your district that are tied to understanding safe and supported students. So I'm going to have you go to this Jamboard. The first 2 pages of this is an opportunity for you to fill up with all of the data sources you can think of that are available in your district tied to safe and supported students. So once you're there, you're simply gonna, and I see that Judy's there too, you'll click on the sticky note icon on the left toolbar and type your ideas. And so when you're finished, notice the data sources that everyone else is listing. We'll give you about 5 minutes to post on our Jamboard.
And if it gets a little full, Lisa, they can go to page 2, correct?
Absolutely. We've set up 2 pages for this, anticipating a lot of ideas. I see some great sources here. Looking at student perception surveys. I see Angel List, which is very interesting. Love to hear more about that. Panorama is listed by a couple. I've actually done some reading about that recently, taking a look at some of the data that you can access with that. Some technology surveys, YRBS. That, I believe the DPI is going to get that started again next fall, the fall of 21, so that you'll be able to get some, run that again and get some more current data. So we've got some achievement, office referrals, EduClimber, which I'm assuming just compiles a variety of these pieces for you, engagement data, attendance. So an angel list, Rachel shares that an angel list is done by counselors for students to indicate adults in the building they feel safe sharing with. Fantastic idea. Great. I see the page filling up. That's great. So we're going to dive into some of these sources and more as we continue throughout this morning. Appreciate your sharing these slides. We will be going back to this Jamboard to do some other things. But right now, let's head back to the slides. All right, here we go. So we're going to consider today 3 types of student data sources. We're going to look at achievement, engagement, and perception. So taking a look at some of the sources listed here, do the sources that you shared on the Jamboard align with these 3 types? Are there sources listed for each? Is it an equal representation of the 3 types? Are we heavy on achievement or heavy on engagement? Taking a look too at how these sources, how do they reveal that students are or are not feeling safe or supported in their learning environment? So again, taking a look at the data sources listed here, there were a number of them that were listed on the Jamboard. And we're going to talk about some more. Okay, Judy, let's move the slides and just dive a little bit into achievement data sources. So we know that achievement data can be an early indicator for potential concern regarding safe and supported students. Sudden and unexpected drop in grades or test scores is sometimes an indicator that educators should take notice of students' needs. More data and root cause analysis must be explored, though, before decisions can be made about any causality. And you can see some sources that we've listed there in regards to achievement. One of the 3 types we're going to be exploring. And let's move on to engagement. If you want to, there we go. Engagement data provides indicators that students feel safe and engaged in their learning. We can look at students' emotional engagement, like whether they feel safe and connected to their peers, teachers, and school. We can look at behavior engagement. That encompasses traditional sense of engagement, things like attendance, participation, and other behaviors that are visible indicators of a student's level of engagement. Clearly, COVID-19 and virtual learning adds a caveat to this, harder certainly to gauge. But finally, cognitive engagement gets at how a student feels about their learning and the tasks that they complete. Is their learning relevant? Does it have impact in their world? Do students feel confident and competent in their abilities to complete learning tasks? And I want you to think about which of these types of engagement do you measure? I'll give you just a few minutes to think on that. And you can again see some sources that are listed in the slide.
There's also some listed in the notes
And
in that section as well on this slide.
Yep. Links. And we can move on to the next slide that talks about perception data sources. Perception data is a great way to get at kids' thinking and feeling about being safe and supported. We've listed a number of resources here, and some of you had already listed those, in our Jamboard, but they come with a warning. Surveys and related data do not tell the whole story. to get a better understanding of what the data means. Talking to teachers, students, and parents is essential. Also, pay attention to the items. What are students being asked? Make sure the items align well with what you want to know. In addition, ensure you're following your district policy for surveying students, protecting data privacy, and the like. If we move on, I think that we want to give you the opportunity to talk in small groups. And so, Judy, the next slide talks a little bit about a breakout room opportunity. We're going to put you again in small groups. We'd like you to introduce yourselves, select someone to take notes, and that note taker is actually going to interact with the Jamboard. We've got page 3 of the Jamboard set aside for notes regarding this activity. So that you'll need a timekeeper. And the timekeeper's job really is to keep the team on task, to kind of give those 2-minute warnings and help keep the team focused on the questions and really looking at both of these questions. Want you to collaborate, and you'll also need a facilitator. So you'll need a facilitator, a note taker, and a timekeeper in your group that we'll be putting you in. And the questions you're going to take a look at are here. How do you measure the types of student engagement and student perceptions of feeling safe and supported? And how are you using this data to inform your COVID-19 response? And so we've got Jenna, who's organizing our breakout rooms for us. And you will have 10 minutes once you get in the breakout room to break yourselves into those roles. Again, a note taker, a timekeeper, and a facilitator to have some discussions. And please make sure everyone has the opportunity to participate. And how are we doing on breakout rooms?
Add their notes to page 3, right, of the Jamboard.
Yep. Yep.
And we are all set.
And you are all set, Jenna. So everyone should be getting an invite to a breakout room here shortly, and we'll give you 10 minutes to have a small group discussion.
Okay, breakout rooms are open, everybody.
All right, well, welcome back, everyone. Saw some neat things listed on the, let us know in the chat how many of you are familiar or with staff, or I want to point your attention to the chat. We did have links that you might find helpful, so I want to draw your attention there. Before we, I'm sorry?
Lisa, you, it must have cached some of your words. Could you repeat what you said, because it was very, very quick and somewhat mixed up?
Okay, well, I just wanted everyone to take a look at the chat, making sure, because we have posted some new information and links in there. So I'm grateful for that. Want to check in with folks. Anyone have anything to share with the large group, or did anyone see anything on the Jamboard that you have a question about? Here's your opportunity to kind of address the whole group with either some comments or questions and thoughts about measuring safe and supported students. Anyone have anything to share?
I would just have one thing to maybe not share, but to request, if it would be possible some way. I'd be curious to see what surveys other districts have used to survey their parents and their students specific to virtual students, and their feeling of their sense of, safety, belonging, just how it's going. If there'd be a way to do that.
I saw several posts of people using Panorama. Do you think Panorama is sensitive to Jeff's question there in terms of the survey questions?
I'm not sure to what extent you can tailor the questions in Panorama. There's a little bit of personalization, and I guess I would need to have more information to be able to answer that. Marianne, how about you?
I have not used Panorama recently, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think if anyone has used it more recently, they might be able to address that question better.
Sure. I also know that TNTP has developed some really great surveys that right at the beginning of the pandemic, having to do with some of the things that you're talking about. And they had surveys for parents, for staff even, and students. And so those are free and online. That might be a resource that you could use and adapt at least. Other ideas, some of these other, like McRel, I think had some information in some of the links that we included here. And some of their toolkits may have some of those resources to survey and get some feedback as well. Other ideas for the question?
Lisa, the TNTP
I will.
are
Go ahead.
Slide 20. So some people are asking about what is TNTP, and there's a link in the notes to the student engagement survey related to the opportunity myth. So if anybody wanted to go back to slide 20, there's some links there.
Yeah, TNTP is the New Teacher Project, and it is a fantastic nonprofit that conducts research and organizes resources. We have brought them into our CISA to do some support when the pandemic first started. And so their website is just a plethora of information and free resources for you, including those surveys that are linked on slide 20. Thanks for reminding me of that, Judy. All right. Well, keep the questions and comments coming and use the chat. We bring you all back together and thinking about equity. So it's really important that you're disaggregating data by grade level, student group, gender, race, and ethnicity. That gives you information about how each group might experience safe and supported schools differently. Disaggregating data is a huge benefit. It gives you some great information across student groups, but keep in mind that at the classroom level, it's much more difficult to collect this type of data due to student privacy. And so we want to just remind you that confidentiality of surveys is essential, so students feel safe in responding. So small numbers of students make it much harder to maintain that privacy. So just wanted to send that reminder to you. And last but not least, for the student data section, want you to have the opportunity to reflect a little bit in your note-taking template. Revisit that. Take a few minutes to jot down your thinking about what you've learned so far. What new data sources do you want to explore further? And what are your next steps? So we'll give you about 4 or 5 minutes for this, and then we'll come back together and shift gears a little bit to head into the adult practices that may indicate some of our outcomes. So 5 minutes.
All right, we'll let you wrap up your comments in your template, and welcome back. So at this point, we're going to move into our green ring, which will, here we're going to focus our attention on adult practices. So keep in mind that the student data inquiry is by no means complete at this point, but as Lisa said, we just don't have time to go all the way through that and share a little bit about adult practices, which we know is really important. So we would normally continue the data inquiry process for student data by conducting an investigation, clarifying the findings that we get from that investigation and hypothesizing with a root cause analysis. However, today, again, we're going to move directly into the exploration of adult practices just to give you a partial experience, at least for this process. This is a shift now from using a magnifying glass to look at student indicators to using a mirror to focus on what we, the adults, are doing. So we're going to again pose questions and identify potential data sources of the adult practices related to our students' feelings of being safe and supported. So the question now that we're going to use to guide this part is, how do you know if your practices are effective so that all students feel safe and supported during the pandemic? Again, here we must identify our data sources. So what data sources do we have on teacher and leader practices that will help us answer that question? So think about what practices are teachers and leaders using to meet the needs of students. What's the evidence that we have that the practices are effective? How are teachers and leaders collecting and using data to make necessary adjustments to meet the students' needs? And what data should we gather to determine if our strategies are actually working? So again, we want to use the Jamboard here. We're going to take a few minutes to brainstorm some data sources about adult practices that you might have available in your district. We're going to use pages 4 and 5 of the Jamboard this time. And so once you're in the Jamboard, you can, choose whether you want to put your notes on 4 or 5. And again, look at some of the other data sources that others are listing, because it might spark an idea of another source that you might have. So we're going to put about 5 minutes on the clock here, but we'll kind of gauge when the data sources stop rolling in, right? We'll move on, but let's see what we can come up with. Put our thinking caps on here. What educator practices, data, evidence might you have? And just a reminder, there's little arrows at the top of the page if you haven't found those yet to move on to the next page of the Jamboard. So as we see, it's a little bit harder to think about what data sources you might have that you're going to use to investigate, how do we know that the students are feeling safe and supported? And so these have come in a little slower, right? I love that some of you have, it sounds like, put together actual groups to address this, right? Gathering some information, asking those questions through just interviews or informal or formal, right? So some of you are having roundtables, some of you are just having conversations, right? And asking those questions. So thank you for sharing some of those. And if you think of others, please add them to this page. Judy, if you want to take us back to the slides, I think. So again, these data sources look different in many ways from our student data sources, because we're asking about adult practices, right? I know one person put iReady data, and I guess I'm not sure how we use iReady data for making sure students are feeling safe and supported. It might be a secondary source, saying that if they're doing well in the academics, maybe they are feeling okay, but it's not a direct source, I don't think. So unless there's something else in iReady that I'm not aware of. So on this slide, you're going to see some educator practices that contribute, right, to students' feelings of feeling safe and supported, to build meaningful relationships, right, ensure that safe learning environment, but thinking about what sources of data do we have that inform us about each of these. But the idea of where you can get some of these focus areas, right? You can look at your EE frameworks of Danielson, Strong, and Marzano, for example. But these are all areas of practices that you could investigate, but you can't investigate them all. So perhaps you find in your student data, the student data part, that students are not feeling as if they belong, or maybe that your students say that they don't have relationships with some of their teachers. So thinking about from that perspective, right, what data could you gather to determine if your practices are effective in developing a culture of belonging among students? And so we typically guide teams through what we call, and which you are familiar with probably as well, a root cause analysis that narrows that focus of a particular practice that might be contributing directly or indirectly to the student data. And so that helps us then to prioritize one or just a couple practices to explore. And it really does help to collaborate and determine this target for your practice investigation. So we've shared some links here in the notes of this slide for resources on adult practices for supporting the social emotional needs of students. So please reference this slide in the notes for some more ideas on resources there. And thank you. There are a few examples of practices with evidence that you might gather to explore here. And keep in mind that both teachers and leaders should be utilizing practices to ensure consistency. So we don't necessarily see these in just a few classrooms, but we want to see them more broadly across the school or district for that impact. So hopefully this slide helps to give you some other ideas and to guide some focus for you. And this slide provides some examples and possible practice data sources to use when investigating educator practices related specifically to safe and supported students. Keep in mind that surveys and related data, though, as we said with the student data as well, that surveys do not tell the whole story. So again, talking to students, as many of you referenced in the Jamboard, and talking to teachers and parents, that is essential to get that full picture and a better understanding of what the data means and what they're really feeling. That's really helpful. So Judy, if you want to move on. So we've adapted a tool that we think that you will appreciate, be able to use to evaluate some of your current practices. We also have linked in the notes on this particular slide the source document that we adapted this from. But this is a self-assessment designed to help you examine 4 areas of safe and supportive practices. And we're going to give you a chance to pick one of these and explore just one area today. I don't know how much time you'll have to go beyond the one area, but know that this is designed to give you just a taste, and you'll want to come back, hopefully, and utilize your team approach to complete the self-assessment in its entirety. So what we've linked here, and hopefully this link works, so I'm going to ask my team to double check that. Thank you. So we want you to utilize this link and make a copy for yourself and use about 10 minutes here to complete one section. and you pick which one looks most appealing to you at this point in time. That will be fine. You're going to rate each item and think about what evidence would support your rating of each of those items. And after you review that, enter your reflections in the notes template that we've been using throughout the morning, and consider linking this self-assessment right into that notes template, as Judy's showing here on this next slide, because then you'll be able to find this real quick. So there's already words in your template that you can just link your copy of this right in your notes. So we're going to give you 10 minutes to dig into this a little bit. So we'll put 10 minutes on the clock. And again, feel free to use the chat if you have questions throughout your work time here. Okay, we want to check in. Does anyone need a little more time? Please let us know in the chat. Otherwise, I think we'll wrap this up. We have lots of really good information to share with you yet on next steps.
So let's talk about next steps. So how do you follow up with what we've introduced you to today? You know, we only had an hour and a half with you today, but there's so much more that we would love to share with you. So we have some extension activities for you. So on slide 35, you'll see some links. So first of all, Lisa introduced you to the full data inquiry process, the 3 rings, which I'm holding up right here. The red ring of student data inquiry, the green ring that Marianne took us through on practices, and then the whole improvement planning steps. If you want to plan for a fuller data inquiry, we suggest you use the data inquiry planning guide to think that through, and you can also work with a CISA data specialist on that. Secondly, we have recorded a video on using the data inquiry journal, which is a wonderful tool embedded within WISE-, but does allow you to use local data sources, just like the ones we shared with you today. So you could actually start a data inquiry journal and follow your inquiry. And we also put the link into the slides with a script for that. The third option is to conduct a root cause analysis. Now we have a video about that with pauses for actual teamwork and slides, but remember, a student data inquiry should be completed first so that you know what your priority need is for students. What's your big outcome or problem statement for students? And once you have that, then you can engage in the root cause analysis. So both the video and the slides are linked here. We also want to remind you that we have an open office hour session scheduled for November 20. So you have an opportunity to do these extension activities and connect back. All 4 of us will be ready for you with open office hours from 1 to 3 on November 20. And there's a link on the Zoom there. Lastly, we want to just thank you so much for connecting with us today, and remind you that we can talk about effective instruction on December 3rd. Remember, it's going to be framed around COVID. But please respond to this brief survey. We would love your feedback and guidance as we move forward in our next work. So thank you again, everyone. Please stay safe. We so appreciate it. If we're on for a minute or 2 yet, so if you want to unmute your mic, anything you want to say or put something in the chat, we're just so happy to hear from you.
Did you mention the office hours?
Yes, on slide 35, yes, those office hours are on November 20 and 1 to 3. Yep, open office hours are there, and we hope you can come in and just tell us what's going on and how you're doing. We would love to hear from you. No, it's a real challenging time for you guys out there. And don't forget about your local CISA data specialist. We train them in all things WISExplore, so they are your go-to people as well. But you can always contact us at WISExplore@cisa7.org. That email address is on the WISExplore website through DPI. You can always go there as well. Send any questions or messages. Also, I think Jenna through ASA manages emails, and I'm sure she'd send something on if she received anything.
Absolutely.
But thank you all. Anything from Marianne or Lisa you would want to add?
No, trying to get out and enjoy some sunshine maybe. Thanks for joining us.
Yes. Get away from the screen, stretch a little bit. And we really want to know if you follow up with any of these activities, you know, the self-assessment, how did that work for you? Bring it to a team, engage in that self-assessment, take your time through it. Maybe just one section at a time. We'd love to know how that works for you.